Same.
Woohoo! So hi everybody. Welcome to Accessibility in Gaming. Why is it important? We'll go down the table, kind of introduce ourselves. I'll start since I'm the moderator. So my name is Abby. I am a board game content creator occasionally, but also a senior in college working on a degree in accessibility studies. And I also have some chronic illnesses that led me to this whole conversation. So if we want to start down that way, then we'll work
Oh,
our
sure.
way.
Yeah. So my name is Arwen Kafke. I run the Cardboard Time podcast. The reason that I am here and in this conversation is that I do have a color vision deficiency. So a lot of people know that as color blindness. Usually I prefer the term, and we will get into that in my workshop tonight. Cheap plug. But yeah, that's what I do here. So yeah, I'm a podcaster and talk about color vision.
I am Carla Kopp. I run Weird Giraffe Games. I am also a game designer and developer. So in those roles, I care about accessibility a lot because I want everyone to have fun. I also have a variety of chronic things. So yeah.
And I'm Christina, otherwise known as Mouse or Tiny Chaos Mouse. I am a freelance consultant who works in the gaming industry. I help people who design video games and teach RPGs and board games be able to make their games more accessible and open to everyone. Like most of this table, I have a variety of chronic illnesses, and that's kind of how I got into this. So yeah.
All right. So the first thing is, what was the first time that accessibility in gaming was important to you? And was it like, was there a specific moment? Was it just kind of always there? Like, what made you inspired to focus on accessibility in gaming?
For me, it was the game Sagrada. As like a lot of people know. Well, if you play with anyone that's colorblind, that game is near impossible to not make a mistake at. And just like playing with one of my friends where he would just get so sad when he realized like, oh, he took the wrong die because he couldn't tell the difference between the purple and the blue. And just like seeing him so sad like several times in the game for like no obvious reason, like he's not doing anything wrong, he just can't tell the difference. That got me like looking into like how to make games colorblind friendly and just using different colors and what are other ways to make games more fun, and then just going down the rabbit hole of, like if we can make like my one friend David really happy, how can we do that for a lot of different people, like the majority of people? So yeah.
I think for me, Carla stole my answer. So, Sagrada is. I have news about Sagrada, but I can't talk about it. But I will say that fortunately there has been a little bit of work done on it with artisans coming out. That has definitely helped with that. But yeah, Sagrada was literally the drafting of, oh, you can't place that there, Arwen. Yes, I can. It's that color. No, it's not. And to come to that realization is like, oh no, there's an issue. And I think one of the things that really got me passionate about the space was first seeing Carla's designs and seeing the work that, you as a publisher had done as far as securing color vision accessibility for the products that you were putting out. And then Brian Chandler's website, who could unfortunately not be here with us today due to some family concerns, and seeing him and his work in the space and seeing that, yes, you can actually make things better, wanted to, basically spurred the desire for me to continue to talk about it from my front, because the more voices that talk about it, the more people that know about accessibility concerns, the better.
And for me, I'm kind of a black sheep up here. I started realizing that accessibility in gaming was important when I was really, really little. I have dyscalculia, which for those that don't know, it's like having dyslexia with numbers. I can't read clocks. I can't tell my left from my right. I can't read a map to save my life, and numbers are the enemy. Thankfully, I grew up with a grandmother who understood that because way before I was born, she was an educator. And she kind of realized I was struggling with numbers. So she kept finding creative ways to help me be able to play games without freaking out because I couldn't read the dice or couldn't do the math. And so it started really young, and that just kind of spurred this entire lifetime of making sure that if I wanted to play a game, everyone could play it. And that was kind of my MO for the longest time. Then I realized how important that was up into my adulthood, and that got me into consulting. And then here I am.
And so for me, I don't design games. I just play games, play a lot of games. But I noticed I had problems with my hands, and so like little fiddly bits, I always have the hardest time with. And so my partner had to like grab bits for me. Or like if like there was a lot of cards, I like terraforming Mars. I know that at one point I literally just like jammed my cards into a pile and just set them down because I'm like my hands aren't working. I can't. Um, and so then I started taking classes in accessibility, and I was like, oh, I really like being a squeaky wheel online and just being annoying about things. I'm gonna totally be annoying about these things. And then I just fell down a rabbit hole, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many cool things. And bless my partner for me always going, hey, did you know about this? And he goes, okay.
No.
And I was just like, hey, well, what about this? And he's like, okay. And I was like, this is so cool. And that's why we're here. So, um, so what is something that you think makes a big impact that people might not know about? So I know obviously we talked about Scrata, which funny enough, that was one of the first things I always think of because I'm like, those colors are really terrible. So,
It's always the grotto.
it's always the
always
so actually I know it was brought up that so like even when you don't think the things should be accessible, so like I think it was Everdell that you were talking about on a stream. The cards are tiny. There's a lot of words on some of those cards. You can't read them on a good day. Heaven forbid you have any sort of vision issue, hand issue, anything. So things like that, like those are kind of things that nobody actually thinks are like accessible, but is good things to think about. So what are some other things?
I mean, like going on that one, as a publisher, I have to really think about like how cards and stuff are going to be used. Like if a card is in your hand, the font size has to be a different size than if it's on the table, and like making sure you know exactly how all the pieces are going to be used. Like if a card is in your hand most of the time, but also could be on the table, like you have to make sure I think like in the hand, like the rule of thumb is like at least size 8 or higher, but like on the table it should be like size 12 or higher. And also it's different because fonts are all different. Like a size 8 could be different in different fonts, so you have to like make sure to check that.
That's actually really cool. I didn't know that. It was just brought up, and I was like, that's something I want to mention because I didn't think about that because I played Everdell once, and I was like, I can't with this. And they're like, the cards are tiny. I'm like, oh, they are tiny. And I think that was probably one of the reasons that I just naturally was like, I can't do this.
Well, and when you're choosing fonts, there's like a lot of fonts that are terrible, and they might look really pretty, but I always I have friends that are dyslexic, and so I always try to like make them read it and see if they can actually read it. I did get really excited once because there was a dyslexic friendly font, and I was like so excited I was gonna like have all the rule books that I have available online in the dyslexic friendly font. But then I discovered I could not read it.
No.
So while it is very easy for dyslexic people to read certain fonts, it also goes the other way. So you can do that though. You could have like a dyslexic editor or something, like edit all of it, because like I just could not stare at that rule book long enough to finish it. Well, because like you can't just change a font. You have to make sure like, oh, the words are different, like links, like you have to make sure like they don't, like the paragraph doesn't go off, or like the word isn't floating all weird. And also just like besides that, like making sure to have like the different types of things for people in rule books, like examples for the people that read examples, and bullets, and as short of sentences as possible.
And then like we kind of go off a lot. It's not just about like the fonts and the being able to read it. Like you have to think of the game space itself. For example, like my hands sometimes just refuse to work. And if I'm playing a board game, having like a laser pointer or a little shuffleboard to or shuffleboard pole to move my pieces makes it so much more accessible to me because then I don't have to worry about dropping things or trying to get my hands to stop trembling, and it allows me to continue play without interruption. I think that's a huge part because yes, we can have accessibility tools, but you also have to make sure that like it's not interruptive, it doesn't break immersion.
That's true. There's a lot of games that I have like knocked stuff over. I've sent pieces flying,
Same.
and I'm just like, whoops, sorry. And there are times where I literally will just hand my piece, and I'm like, can you just put that over there? Thank
Exactly.
you. Which is great and everything, but sometimes it makes you feel like dependent on others,
Yeah.
which is not always fun. Um,
I think in general, to kind of sum things up, it's literally trying to think of how you are conveying this experience to your audience. So you have this board game that is an experience in a box, and you have to think of all the different people that are going to touch that. So I'm conveying that you have to draw 2 cards. How am I going to do that? Is that going to be through color? Is that going to be through a symbol? Is that going to be through both? Hopefully. And thinking about that experience for multiple different people and having that kind of empathy for others and trying to say, okay, so I've got this card, but it's really tiny. What's that going to do? One of the things that I really didn't think about was I come at this from a color vision impairment perspective, and there's people out there who have very low vision or are completely blind. How do they experience this? And I think the more people that you can involve, because that's what this hobby is meant to do, is involve people and have everybody have a good time, the better.
so kind of on that note, so what are some resources for accessibility that you found that you love, you go to, or just, anything that like you could see, you find yourself going back to for like resources, information, knowledge checks, anything?
Colorblindgames.com.
That's such a
Yep.
good one. Such a good one.
I'm gonna plug Brian's site because it's what got me started on this whole thing. Colorblindgames.com is an absolutely fantastic resource for not only color vision accessibility, but also for just general accessibility concerns as well. So he's gotten a little bit into using dyslexic friendly fonts and things like that too. So I love to see him branching out like that.
Yes.
Yeah, so he also does reviews, and he will go through the accessibility of a game from like a lot of different lenses, like from colorblind friendly to like how expensive is it, how big are the pieces, and like you can just learn a lot just by reading a couple reviews. Like one, you learn about the game because we all love board games, but then you get to be like, oh yeah, price is definitely a factor too.
They totally stole my answers.
I also like, there's an app, it's called CVS, the Chromatic Vision Simulator, where you can just take pictures of things. Like I have a palette that I use that is colorblind friendly, theoretically. But just because like the colors and the Pantone like are colorblind friendly, what is the actual physical product? Because it can be different for different reasons, just because like the shape of things and the physicality and being able to use that. So what it is, it's a camera, and you can use different lenses. You could be like, oh, I want to see all the different kinds of color blindness and like how they would be, or like if somebody's partially colorblind. So you can just see it like the actual physical thing. It's not like as good as having like a series of friends of all the different color blindnesses, but like that is also very difficult, and you need to have a lot of people's time for that. But just having the app is a really good check.
There's also a website. They're not as active anymore, but it's called Meeple Like Us. And so it is 2 people who went through and they review board games, and they based it, there's like 7 different accessibility things. So it's like vision, dexterity, socioeconomic. They went so in, and they will grade games based on that. So you can go in, and they've done a whole bunch of games, and they grade them based on that. And so it's always really cool to see like how to dig in on different levels. So if you want to look at vision impairment, is it just the color vision? Is it, should you use braille? Things like that. And I think it's really cool that someone did that. And then they also wrote a book. So if you do design games, it is called Tabletop Game it's Meeple Centered Design, and it's tabletop game accessibility. So it's a super cool. You just Google Meeple Like Us, they pop right up. I spent hours on their website, and then I want to say he's maybe like Germany or Switzerland, somewhere in Europe. And I definitely sent him an email like 2:00 in the morning his time. And I was like, I just found your website, and I'm in school for this, and this is the coolest thing ever. So thank you. Very lovely, responded the next day at a totally appropriate hour. And was like, thanks. But I was like, I just realized I sent you an email at 2:00 in the morning. And for most people, that comes off as a little unhinged when you're like, why did I get this email at 2 in the morning that just says, thanks for your website? But super cool. And then there's also companies that do make like accessibility kits for games. So there's 64-ounce games that has kits for games like Bang, Bonanza, Ticket to Ride. So like, for Ticket to Ride, I know it was like an overlay. And I have a love-hate. I love Ticket to Ride. I love train games. But those bits get real fiddly. And if you shake, you can accidentally knock off a whole train route. If you drop your piece, I've done them all. And I've watched train routes just disappear. But it has an overlay. And then you can put your trains in. And then they stay. And I do love that. So we did kind of touch on some things. So what are things that designers can keep in mind for designing for accessibility?
That they're not just designing for themselves. Like, I think that's a huge part, because with designing games, at least from my perspective as not a game designer, it's so easy to just get wrapped up in what you want and what works for you and what you find enjoyable, that sometimes you can forget, hey, there are other people who are going to enjoy this game just as much as you, and you want to make sure that it's accessible. So it's so important to hire consultants and to ask opinions of people who, like are colorblind or have trembling hands or completely blind or deaf. Like there's a wide rainbow of people who can play games, and it's not fair to leave any particular color out.
And just having like a very diverse set of playtesters is really good.
Yes.
Because like you never know like what perspective somebody will have, like whatever in their background will be like, oh, well, this was hard for this reason. Because we all like have our own histories and stuff. And like just the more people you playtest and the more you try to get like different people than you to playtest, the better your game will be overall.
I think it's an interesting conversation, and Carla and I were actually having it yesterday and this morning about different roles in the industry, because we always talk about the designer and their impact on things, and there's definitely that where the designer is like the start of it, where you can bake that in and you can say, hey, I've got double coding, or I'm using the right size cards. Or I have dual layered player boards that, things won't slide out if I have small components. But then there's developers who can then go and be another check that can go and say, hey, you missed this, let's put this in. The publisher can go in and say, we need to do some work on this. The content creator can go and talk about that design if it is deficient, or also promote good designs too, which is why I talk about color vision. I try to talk about vision in general. Brian does his reviews where he comes at it from a bunch of different angles. So I think it's like a whole industry effort, that there's different things that you can do at different steps. And there's multiple different avenues to approach it. But to everybody's point, having that diverse framework and that diverse set of ideas and experiences and cultivating that community around yourself is so incredibly important.
And like also making sure it's a safe space, because like not only do you have to have like a like involve like a great diversity of people, if you don't make it safe and comfortable for somebody to be like, oh yeah, like this is actually kind of racist, and like having the right response to that, because like like I made a game about cats and it was about cats to me, and then one of my friends was like, hey, this is actually a little bit racist, and I was like, well, okay, like that's not what I intended, but how do I fix it? Like, and then like I swapped it. Like I changed like the scoring conditions from the black cat to the orange cat, solved it. But like just acknowledging that like there's all these things that we can do that we like might not intend, but they can have bad like repercussions, and just making sure like you have people that are willing to like tell you the truth. Like if you are willing to be like, hey, what are my mistakes? What can I do better? And show like a history of like, oh, okay, when people have said this is what you should fix and you actually do something about it, it will make people more comfortable to come up to you in the future.
Yeah, I think it does take a community. I mean, you can solo board game, but most board games are meant to be shared. So it is good to diversify. So you have, because I would never expect one person to speak on everything. Like I wouldn't look at Arwen and be like, can you tell me if this impacts people who have something that Arwen has no experience with? Because Arwen could be like, sure, it sounds good. It looks like it's pretty good. And then, on the other end of the table, you could be like, well, actually, hold on. This is why. So I think it is good to make sure that there's a wide variety of voices included. And there's a game out there, I'm not going to name it, but there's actually a lot of fast-paced games where you have to stand up and you have to be able to like throw stuff down real quick. And if you are really struggling with executive function and you have a body that doesn't cooperate, those games get really hard really fast, and then instantly you don't want to play anymore, because it's like, I can't jump up to slap my coin across the table, and I also don't even know what I'm trying to do. I need 2 seconds to think about this, and people are yelling because that's the game. So things like that, it's important to think about, because if you focus your designs on able-bodied individuals with no issues, you're cutting out a huge group of people that just can't play for a variety of reasons.
So another resource is like, okay, so say you don't have like a lot of friends or a lot of different friends. I consult with Double Exposure. They're just a group that a publisher can hire, that they're helpful in a lot of ways. Like they can help you with conventions and getting helpers and proofreading, and basically you're a publisher, you need anything, call them and they will try to fix it. But also they know a lot of consultants. Like if I need a consultant on whatever the topic is, they can connect me with a consultant, and they make it really easy. Because like if you go out on your own and you're like, okay, how do I even find a consultant? Do I just post on social media?
Yes.
How do I verify that this person is good? I like them because they have their roster of like, oh, okay, well, for this topic, we go to this person.
I love that.
Also, pay your consultants, please.
Yes. Yes.
100%.
Yes. Nobody likes free labor. No. So anyone can make an impact on accessibility, and this is something that I only realized because I did a homework assignment on it. But anybody, if you walk into your game store and you realize that your game store has one entrance and it has a stair, and there are no other accessible entrances, right there is an issue that anybody can point out. And I only realized it when I went to go do a homework assignment. I was like, oh, dang, you have to go around the block and there's no sign and that door's locked. So you have to essentially do like a secret code and hope they answer their phone, all to avoid one single stair. So if you notice something, you can say something. Even if it's an email to the designer going, hey, this is not working for this reason. And I feel like everyone should feel like they have that voice. Um, because every time I see the title "Friendly Local Game Store," I'm like, it's not friendly if you can't even get in the dang door.
Nope.
And that was just something I wrote down because I was like doing a whole assignment on it, and I was like, wow, you can't even get in. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
And like even playing on that, like it's not just the entry. Like if your tables are like this high, I'm not going to be able to play a game because I am in a wheelchair. Like it's not just the game itself, it's the space around the game, it's where you are playing the game, the environment. Like there are so many factors in making sure that your game is accessible to everybody, and it starts at, like she said, or they said, the door.
And I think that speaking up is so incredibly important because that helps perpetuate the message too. And I've seen game groups that I've been involved with that went and had no perspective of color vision accessibility to now they repeatedly go and say, hey, I played this game and it did this really well, or it didn't do this really well. And now I know like I could fix that. I could fix that for my friends so that, you know, they're able to go and they're able to join in with me in experiencing this. So it's just so incredibly important because I think it's just a matter of, oh yeah, I didn't think of that in most cases.
I just want to make sure you didn't have anything I don't think. Okay. And so also diversity is always a big talk. We hear a lot about DEI. Disabled individuals with disabilities often get left out of that diversity portion. And it's something I'm seeing a change in very slowly. I'm seeing more designers and more companies who are like, oh, hey, this is like color vision friendly. Like this game is, we've done this work. And that's great. We just need more. And so every couple of years we see we're going to keep adding things on. We just got to keep those squeaky wheels of, yes, we need diversity in all sorts of aspects, but don't forget disability. That's still something that needs to be included and contributed and really thought about, especially in this community where it started off, I think we can all agree, as like a, able-bodied white man sport. That's how it started off. That's not where we are anymore. We're getting away from there. We got to keep moving forward. And also, it's something that was brought up in my class, but being disabled is the only minority that anybody can join at any point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in that class, it was literally a light bulb moment where I was like, oh my God, what if I couldn't play games anymore? Because that's my partner and I, that's all we do. Play games. That was our bonding. That's how we like formed this whole relationship we have. I was like, what if I couldn't do it anymore?
And like going off of that, it's not just everybody can be disabled. It's more of it's not an if, it's a when, because when you get into older age, you're gonna have disabilities. There's no avoiding it. And you have to take that into consideration of, well, okay, I can play this game now, but am I gonna be able to play this game the same way in 30, 40 years?
Yeah.
I think, the motto for Origins for a long time, not that Origins is the greatest convention in the world, but the motto for Origins, if I'm not mistaken, was a place for all at the table. And we need to get there, and we're not there yet. I didn't hear a place for all at the table but disabled people. I didn't hear a place for everybody at the table but queer people, and we need to continue to march on and continue to include everybody in that. And I think expanding that scope and saying, okay, who are we leaving out? Because even just from a business perspective, if you're looking at this as a publisher and your only concern is to make money off of this, which if you're in the board game industry, you're not doing.
It's the wrong industry.
You have chosen poorly. I think even if you're just looking at it from that perspective, you have a certain group that you are excluding. You have sales that you are excluding. You have a potential member of the community that is going to advocate and be like, hey, look at all these amazing experiences that we can have. And you won't have that because they couldn't be included from the get-go.
Well, and like one of the cool parts about accessibility, like if you make something colorblind friendly, everyone is going to be able to differentiate those colors better. Like it's going to be a brighter game. Like I have never once said in a game like, oh, how I enjoy like trying to differentiate between this like orange and red thing. Like I'm not colorblind in the least. And last night, like I played a game where I mixed up dark orange and red, and I was like, oh, my entire plan like is just gone because like I was going for I thought dark orange, and there's dark orange and red, and like just making it better for like specific people makes it better for everyone. And don't you want everyone to have more fun?
Exactly. Like for me, and it can start so small. Like my favorite set of dice at home don't have numbers on them. They have numbers. They're not the Roman numbers. That it's written out like 5, 6, 1. And because I have dyscalculia, that's pretty much the only way I can process numbers. Like my favorite D6 in the world is just something someone made me that has numbers that I can understand. And like it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You can start small and build on that.
Yeah, and you're not taking away anything by making games accessible. It's not like all of a sudden if you make or change one thing, if you put the double layered boards so that pieces sit in there, you're not all of a sudden taking away from an able-bodied gamer who's like, oh my god, I can't play this game. There are these beautiful double layered boards. Like, how dare they? Nobody's gonna say that.
It ain't pie.
No, they're
No.
gonna be like, whoa, dual layered boards. That's so cool.
I pay extra money for dual layered boards because I really just love them, but also because I tend to knock everything everywhere. And I've paid money for extra pieces. Actually, I think Terraforming Mars was one that I went all in on, like making bougie. And one of these things was these gorgeous double layered wooden boards. Like you can beat somebody with these things. They are sturdy and they hold pieces so well because I played the game 3 or 4 times and I'd move and I'd knock everything over. I'd be like, I don't even know what I had. And I was like, I can't play this game if I keep knocking everything over. But also they're really pretty. I've never had someone go, ooh, those are ugly. No, everyone's like, dang, those are beautiful. I'm like, I know, right? I paid a lot of money for it to look this pretty. But nobody's going to, you're not taking away from someone by just being like, I want double layered boards and I want my numbers written out so that way everyone can actually read them. Or I want, icons and colors, which also is my favorite thing because there's at least one game that I can think of where the blue and the purple look so much alike that you have to literally go, okay, this is a sword. Don't look at the color because half the time everyone at the table puts down the wrong color anyways. And you're like, that wasn't it. You're like, oh, dang. So you just, things like that. You're not taking away from people.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, and with the dual coding, like, just because somebody can see colors, like, some people, like, their brains just grok shapes better. Like,
Yep.
that is just a fact. Like, some of us do shapes, some of us do words, some of us have to listen. Like, and that's just, we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's spectrums of everything. So, like, putting, like, multiple ways for somebody to figure this out means that everyone can figure it out in their favorite way.
Yeah. I think that's good because nobody's brain works exactly alike. And, oh no, you're good.
So one of my favorite words is sonder, and it means the realization that everyone is living the same kind of complex, beautiful, complicated life that you are. And I think if we take that aspect and like aim it towards gaming, and you start to realize everyone is complex and different and has something to bring to the table, like if we start including that, it's more fun for everybody. Nothing gets taken away.
Yeah. I also will say, I forgot to mention it in the things that I really love, but I really love when games have like little quick rules, little things. I have really bad ADHD. I will tune out probably maybe 10 minutes if we're really lucky. Usually it's more like 5 minutes into a real speech. So And my partner, the rules teacher, giggles at me because he'll spend 30 minutes teaching me a game and I'll look at him and be like, okay, so what do I do? So games that come with just like a little like half page of these are the basics, this is what you do. I love that so much because I tune out.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's not even you. It's literally anybody teaching me a game. I'm like, yes, so what do I do again here?
I mean, every game should have reference cards. Like,
Yeah.
even if you remember things really good, like, say you played a game a year ago, well, if there's a reference card, you can get back into it real fast. So, like, again, like, just because it's really good for one person, like, putting these things in helps out a lot of people for different reasons.
And then, okay, so what are your games that you find like really just hit multiple accessible things? Like, what's your favorite game to recommend to people when they're like, what's a good accessible game for me?
I like Burgle Bros. One, because my partner's like super into the theme. But also it's co-op, which is really accessible. I don't believe there's any hidden information. So like everyone can just say the things, like if somebody is blind, doesn't matter. You could just describe everything to them and it's not changing the game at all. One person can move all the things that they want. Like, so if somebody like bumps over things, like it's okay. I could just move everything. I can be the person that's in control of the stuff while you go do whatever. So yeah.
Funny because Burgle Bros was the first one that came to my mind because I'm like, essentially everyone just talks it out. So it doesn't matter if you can't necessarily see, like if you can get a good enough description of what is going on, you don't necessarily have to look at it. You don't have to super pay attention. Like I think, and a lot of co-ops I think are good for that because if there's no hidden information, if there's no secret roles, like everyone can kind of come together because you are uniting for one goal, which is to beat the game. But yeah, Burger Bros was the first one I thought of because
Same.
I was just like, oh, that's really good. Because if I was like, yeah, you just essentially only one person needs to be able to move and kind of do everything, kind of help with all that.
And who doesn't like heists?
Yeah.
Exactly.
True. Who doesn't want to be a super spy and steal from rich people?
Exactly.
Yeah, and then I think really,
I think I'll throw one in too. Reef and Ruins, I think, was really a
That's a
great
good
example of
one.
that. Not to give somebody the very nature of a roll and write does help where you have one set of dice that's being rolled and you can have somebody that is rolling the dice and announcing the results or conveying that information. It's not going to be as good of an example as Burgle Brothers because it's not completely co-op where everybody can just move the pieces and everything. But I think that from a color vision and accessibility standpoint, you did a really good job as you always do. And just having that ability to try to make that player impact as low as possible is really great.
it was a really good one. Because when Joe taught it to me, I was just like, oh, I was like, it's easy enough that like I can remember because I will be truthful. Half the time I forget when doing roll and writes to chain any of my stuff because the icons are not the best. And then I forget. And then Joe's like 300 points ahead of me. I'm like, how did you cheat that hard? And he's like, I didn't cheat. I just changed. And I was like, oh, but I loved it because I was like, oh yeah, 'cause here I just go here and do this. And he's like, actually, I think on stream there is a quote of him going, "Oh my God, you chained," because I always forget to. And so he's like, "Oh my God, you remembered." And it's like, I did it. But it's really because like the icons all spelled it out, and like it was great. Yeah.
Mine's a game, but actually a component. Dice. There is a company. Gosh, I left my notes at home, but there is a company that just created and released Braille dice, and I believe it's called Dots.
It is. I was gonna say I know there's some downstairs.
Is so in love with this idea because growing up, one of my first childhood friends was vision impaired, and I'd want to play dice games like Yahtzee with them all the time because that was a game I could wrap my brain around, but even with dyscalculia, and they couldn't play it. I had to read them their numbers all the time. I had to do their paper for them. But like knowing now that there are dice like that makes me want to find this person so bad and just give them a set and be like, I'm sorry, this is like 30 years late. But like seeing that get created made my heart so, so happy, because that opens so many doors for so many people, and just it makes me giddy just knowing that something like that exists.
Yes, and I'm going to shout it out. We did talk about it earlier, but there's a trick taking game. I love trick takers. That is coming out with a Braille edition. And first off, it's not like it's hard. It's not a big, giant, huge altering thing to put Braille on cards. But now this game is now accessible to so many more people
So
because of that.
you can actually so 64-ounce games. He actually lives in Houston, town over from me. So I'm working with him to get Braille on some of my games. So you could literally just approach 64-ounce games, and he wants to work with more companies. One, because the way he makes games colorblind friendly or vision accessible is the same way. So like red is always triangle. So once somebody has played one of his games, you can play another one, and
I like that.
yeah, he has like so many 3D printers and cool stuff.
I would that website. I was a rabbit. I just kept scrolling. I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool, because like it was like he had stickers for the cards that were in Braille, and I was like, that's so cool, because like Bonanza, I was like, oh, and it's just like you need the base game, you put the stickers on. I was like, oh, I love that. But then I was like, oh my gosh, there's pieces, and I really do love it. He's like, the consistency is great.
Yeah, like he's the official, like there's a blind association, and he's like the official like game person. Yeah.
What a wonderful way to do that too, because if you think about how you learn games, your first couple of games, you have to learn all the rules and you have to learn all the mechanisms. But when you learn new games now, if you've been in the hobby for a while and you're learning something new, you're taking these familiar learnings and then you're applying new information on top of that. So to have every red card be a triangle, you've learned that, and now you can just expand that out to all sorts of different stuff. How cool is that?
That makes me
I'm impressed.
I love it. So if there's any questions. Oh yeah. Oh gosh, there's actually questions. Again.
I've experienced, I work at a game store, and I experienced a lot of customers in some of our rental library games have issues with textures, in particular velvet bags. I will mention a game, it's called Clank. I love Clank to death, but the giant bag is velvet, and there's just literally people get appalled and they cannot engage with that. Have any of you experienced anything similar to that? And what can we do as far as texture concerns are made in regards to board games?
Overglossed cards are my kryptonite. Like if a card is too slippery and to the point where I can't hold it, there is a popular foul language card game that has overglossed cards that comes in a black box, and as much as I loved that game, the cards are a nightmare for me just because the texture is so sensitive for me. That's just like I can't even handle it. Like having something like simple like card sleeves for cards that have awkward textures to them, or having alternative bags, like you said, the velvet bag. Maybe get a satin bag instead. Like, yeah,
I was like, I like cotton.
Cotton and linen are
because microfiber and velvet, like between me and my teenager, we'll touch it, and my teen is not as adept at hiding things as I am. And I have literally heard him go just because he can't with the texture. So yes, like cotton and like the linen type bags, those are usually my safest bet, because I do hate the bag and Clank, and I'd forgotten about that until you said it, and instantly my hands are like,
I have only touched the bag like once, and I put it back. I was like, I'm not getting this game.
I think it's kind of fascinating because for some people that's actually considered an upgrade.
Yes.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's kind of fascinating because what would probably be cheaper to actually implement is maybe the better solution.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, and this is more on accessibility when we talk about socioeconomic ideas. Gaming in prison as a thing. This is more to shout out. One, do you ever design with the ability for people to adapt and create within a prison environment? And two, have you ever heard of role press conversation games? They're role playing games for people to print out and play in prison.
I have not. That is super cool.
I'll get to you later.
Yes, please do. I love that. No, I think it's cool. I think everyone should have access to games. First
Yeah.
off, it doesn't matter. Gaming is an expensive hobby. It is not meant to be cheap. So when I read the socioeconomic, my first thought was to laugh because I was like, okay. I was like, and then I look at the thousands of dollars I've spent on board games. I was like, yep, there's that. So yeah, and I know more libraries are starting to put games out to rent, and I think that's awesome because getting games in hands of people is the first step. Because again, accessibility is not just one size fits all; it is constantly changing and growing. But yeah, no, that's really cool. I definitely want to talk with you after.
I would love if like donating games would be a lot easier than what it is. Because you can't just like, well, for libraries you can give like regular like public libraries things, and normally it's okay as long as you like certify it with like the head librarian and do it like the right way and give it to the right person. But actually donating to like other sorts of things like involves more red tape and there's liabilities and stuff. And like I wish there was like, I don't know, maybe it's you where we could just talk to you and you like certify like we're not going to get sued for giving away things
Yes.
from America. It's sometimes weird and I don't know, lawyers and stuff.
I thought we had another.
Yes,
question.
I would say I know. Yes.
Yeah, kind of not so much related to that, but just kind of going off of something you said, kind of Kate, by the way, I also see accessibility, but like I know in the bags discussion, it's like, oh, like this fiber works, this fiber doesn't work, but I want to bring up the concept of access conflict, which is where different people may have different accessibility needs. So there's probably not going to be one answer that works for everybody 100% of the time.
Yes.
But like I know there's some maker spaces here, a lot of us in the room are makers, but they just constantly kind of thinking of it as a process. Like, hey, we play this game, this time was accessible for everyone. Oh, we played it this time. This time we need to make adjustments. Like that's actually part of the joy of it too.
It is. And I think
Yeah.
that's why I liked when Carla was like, having a huge group of playtesters is so good because what I have sat in on games where it's like, yep, that works perfectly for everyone. And then the very next group, they're like, none of this worked. And it's like, oh. So ensuring that if you do playtest, you have a diverse group of everything. Because yeah, the velvet bags is something, and I know so many people were stoked about those velvet bags, and I was like,
Mhm.
Okay.
And I think that is something that you don't have to play with the bag that came in the box.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think from a socioeconomic standpoint, I'm very fortunate that I can have multiple bags that I can just pull from and be like, this is an issue, we're using this one. And just think about that, and it's like, is that going to affect you? No. It's going to make this more accessible, it's going to make this easier for everybody to enjoy. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. And I just got the 1 minute left. So any final thoughts?
I really agree with that. Like the goal should always be striving to be more accessible, but like not getting like disheartened because you can't make everyone happy. Like there's always going to be someone that has an issue with something or something you can do better. But like if every year you get a little bit better, that's the goal.
Yeah.
overall.
I agree. I think that's for me. It's always striving to do better and to like learning more. And to, I mean, you should always be learning more. you should never just be like, oh, I've learned it all, I'm good, because that's a full stop on any growth in any capacity of your life. But especially when it comes to things like this, where it's like you learning more and being open and receptive to feedback. It's not like a personal attack. Like, I'm not like, you as a human being are terrible because your game was terrible because of this specific reason. It's like, no, hey, I know you probably didn't think about it, because unless if you experience it, you don't think about it. You know, it's not something where you're just like, oh crap, I never thought of that. So just making sure, you know, you're always open. It's not a personal attack.
And yeah, you guys wrapped it up. Besides, pay your consultant.
Yes.
And don't ever be afraid to admit that you've had a blind spot in the past.
Yeah.
It's not a reflection on you as a person. The reflection is going to be what you do about that and how you acknowledge that and try to work to be better in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.